So she now stepped out for a break. Who's Ashanti? Fraser.
Because I asked him if he could send one to local, so we'll work on that. So, but I want to send that for us to move on to the ornament area. So what's this?
All right, so if you have access to the text, I'm on page 290. Just want to go, well, starting page 289. So the table that we're going to look at, it's a company in the UK called Albion Computers, right? And if the exchange rate remains at $1.60 to the pound, then they expect to sell 50,000 units of computers per year. And they're selling at £1,000 per unit, right? So producing computers, right? They expect to sell 50,000, that's their projection. They're selling at £1,000 per unit. They have a variable cost of £650. Variable cost meaning what? That cost vary based on production, right? So of that 650 variable cost, £320 is imported input, and £330 is from locally sourced inputs, right? So already you see that in producing, part of their production cost is going to be affected by exchange rates, right? So they know what the rate of the pound is today. It's 160 US dollars to £1, right? So the pound price of the imported input is going to change when the exchange rate changes. So that's going to affect the selling price, right? So if the change in the input price changes, it's going to affect your selling price because you want to make some money. If you don't change your price, it means your cost going up and your profit is going to decline, right? If you increase your price too much, then you can become uncompetitive. All right? So Albion, they also have fixed overhead costs of $4 million for rent, property taxes, and so on. So fixed cost means no matter how much you produce, you're gonna have this cost. All right? Variable comes with the production. So if you look at the table there, all right, which shows their operations, their projected operations. This is at $160 per pound. Sales is 50,000 units at $1,000 per unit. It's going to be 50 million. Their variable cost is your 50,000 units times your 650, so that's 32,500,000. Their fixed overhead is 4 million. Depreciation, you have to include that, is $1 million. So your net profit before tax is 12,500,000. They have income tax at a rate of 50%, so that's their corporation tax. And so when you take out your corporation tax, their profit after tax is 6,250,000. And when you are doing operating costs, you add back your depreciation, right? So your operating cash flow in pounds is 7,250,000. All right? So in financial management, you're doing operation cash flows, always remember you add back your depreciation after you work out your taxes to get to your net income, right? Your net operating cash flow rather. So the operating cash flow in pounds is 7,250,000, and you convert that to dollars is 11,600,000, right? So now, if you have a change in the rate, all right, so the pound will, if the pound depreciates to where it's now 140 US to the pound, all right, so less US to the pound, so the pound is depreciating, your dollar operating cash flow is going to change, okay? And it changes because of what we said, the competitive effect. So because the depreciation of the pound is going to affect the operating cash flow, all right? Why does it affect the operating cash flow? Because it alters the competitive position, all right? And the conversion effect, you have the cash flow in pounds. When you convert it to dollars, when the pound has depreciated, of course, your cash flow reduces. So if you look in the next table, all right, you will see what happens. So you're selling 50,000 units at £1,000 per unit, right? That gives you your 50,000. And your variable cost, remember, with your variable costs, a portion of that was in pounds and a portion in US. So you have to convert the US piece to pounds. Your pound has depreciated, so what was the net effect there? If you go back to the initial, so the net effect is your cost has increased, all right? Your pound cost has increased. Remember, it was 32,500,000, and because the pound depreciated, it is now 34,800,000, right? Fixed overhead remains the same, depreciation remains the same. When you do your calculations, you take out your tax, you add back your depreciation. What has happened to the cash flow in pounds?
The decrease.
Has decreased, right? And your cash flow in dollars
Decreased as
has
well.
also decreased, all right? So that is an example of how the change in the exchange rate can affect both the operating, both the competitiveness and your cash flows, okay?
Is it because the pound depreciation? Yeah.
The pound depreciated. Now in Exhibit 12.8, they've decided to change their price, okay? Based on the fact that the pound depreciated.
Okay.
And so what have they done? They've increased
Cost?
their sales price,
Sales price. Let me see.
all right? They've increased the sales price.
Okay.
So that's one way to deal with it. The other way, they have decreased their production. What is the difference? When they increase their sales price, the operating cash flows increase, both in pounds and in dollars. When they reduce their production amount to 40,000 units,
Mm-hmm.
and they also reduce the price. But look at the huge difference. You're selling 10,000 units less, and you have decreased your price not significantly from not from the original, but from the one above. You see the huge change. So when the price was 1,143 pounds per unit, at the 50,000 units, it was 9.6 million they were getting. They reduced their their output by 10,000, and they also reduced their unit price. All right? And you see the big difference there. So it's just a little under half of their operating cash flows, and their in pounds and in dollars. All right? And so that is how companies will try to sort of balance out. But in changing their price, they have to think about how is it going to affect the demand for their goods. All right? When they change their price, their sales went down. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any questions on that? So I wanted to, it's not the table that I'm looking for. Okay, so yes, the strong yen and Toyota's choice. So let's look at this example. This is a little case study. All right, I'm going to sit. So you have it there. Take a read, and then we're going to discuss it. All right, the strong yen and Toyota's choice. Finish reading?
No, I'm
Okay,
still.
anybody not finished? Just show your hand. Alright. You have
2 minutes.
maximum 5 more.
Okay. America to 80,000 people. Okay.
All right, so what was the main issue for Toyota? The Toyota Japan. What was the main issue for that? What was the main issue?
The Japanese yen went up.
The Japanese yen
Went up.
appreciated, so it made their exports more expensive, right? So Toyota tried to adjust, all right? And how did it try to do that?
Shifting
By
production
shifting production to the US. All right? Because if it was, it should be cheaper for them to produce in the US. All right? It should be.
Yeah.
But, so
Sense.
they shifted from Japan to the US to manufacture. The cost of production at that time, it was a long time ago, was lower. All right? And so in their strategic plan, they decided to increase production in the US by about 50%. Okay? And so they would not be exporting to the US, and their expectation that they won't be exporting as much. So their expectation is that their exports will decline by 30%, right? And so they're still exporting, but their exports will decline. However, because they're producing in the US, it's cheaper to produce. So what does that do for Toyota? It's cheaper to produce. What does that help Toyota to do if it's cheaper to produce in the US so that they can reduce their price? Sales would increase, or they would at least maintain their market share in the US. Yeah? All right. Now, what they did, so you had your manufacturing plant in one place, the engines were produced in the US as well, but in Kentucky. All right? And so they were also producing cars in Kentucky, but they shifted production of some things. They shifted production of the pickups that they sold in the US from Japan to California. So once again, they are trying to maintain their market. Not only that, by producing pickups, they're trying to increase their market share. One of the things, if you're not aware, now in the US, back then, Americans are very patriotic in the vehicles they purchase, right? And so in the pickup market, they bought Ford and they bought Chevrolet, right? So the Ford F-150 pickup is still one of the most popular pickup trucks in the US, all right? They sell them down here as well. The one that's popular down here is the Ranger, which is not the greatest pickup, but anyways. Right? So what they did by shifting the production of their pickups to the US is to try to get into the US pickup truck market. Okay? So to increase their market share in US pickup trucks. So the American-built vehicles will now account for more than 60% of Toyota's US sales, right? There's about 800,000 units. Now, if you, well, most of you are too young to know or to remember, but because I am a lot older and I went to school in the US, I saw the transition over time. So you get, I would have, I didn't tell you how when I went to school in the US. It was before 1996, let's just say that, right? And when I went there, most of the vehicles were American vehicles, all right? Your Fords, your Cadillacs, your Lincolns, they had these huge, big vehicles, big cars, and so on, right? Fast forward 10 years. Fast forward to now. Most of the cars, if you go to Miami, it's the closest to us, if you just go to Miami, you will see that Toyotas, Nissans, maybe 10 years later, were more popular than American vehicles, right? They still love their pickup trucks. They're still very dedicated to their Fords, but the Toyota Tacoma is a big truck, is a big pickup truck in the US, okay? Now you have another two, again, non-US brands that's like taking over the US market in cars and SUVs. Anybody can think of what those brands are? Two brands. They're not Toyota, but they're imported. Lexus is Toyota. Sorry. Kia and Hyundai. All right?
Korean. Right?
Yes. Now, what they have, they are much cheaper. All right? So, some of them are made in the US, right? So that company has shifted some of its production to the US, and those cars, those vehicles made for the US market are just as luxurious as the US made, US companies' vehicles. So Ford, Lincoln, Cadillac, those companies, General Motors, the vehicles General Motors makes, they are known for their luxury. They are known for their creature comforts. So what has the makers of Kia and Hyundai done? Well, we say Hyundai here, up there they say Hyundai. What have they done? They have simply made their vehicles look like the luxury vehicles and feel like the luxury vehicles. The other thing that they have been able to do, and again, this is important when you're talking about multinational firms and how they try to reduce their costs while increasing their market share. So they have let me go to so these companies, Kia, Hyundai, Toyota, they have gone to low-cost production sites. It's cheaper to produce in the US, and that's most likely because US had the technology already, because they made their vehicles many years. But guess what? The Chinese, the Japanese, and the Koreans have improved that technology significantly. So they select low-cost production sites, diversify the market, product differentiation. All right? Toyota, if you purchase a Toyota vehicle in the US, you purchase one here and you compare them, the creature comforts are totally, maybe not totally different, but the creature comforts are much different. So in the US, you have heated seats, the interior of basic vehicles they're leather. Here it's fabric. All right. You have cup holders all around. If you go into a Toyota made 10 years ago or a little earlier, you may have 2 cup holders if you have cup holders. When you look at the dashboard, it's not fancy. You look at the ones in the US, they're more fancy, right? So they have utilized product differentiation. Okay, they clearly did some more research and development. So let me just complete what I was saying about the the Hyundai and the Kia. So they are, so those companies have gone into the US and they have captured that market. So their sales have gone up significantly from where they were, let's say 20 years ago. All right, because they've moved their production and they have differentiated their products. One of the huge advantages of purchasing a Hyundai Kia vehicle is that you have a 10-year bumper-to-bumper warranty in the US. Can't get that here, of course, right? But a 10-year warranty says, we believe in our vehicles and we can sell your vehicle at a reasonable cost and we give you a warranty for 10 years. Which means anything wrong with the vehicle, you can go to the dealer gives you a loaner car, and what they do when they give you a loaner is they give you the most luxurious of their fleet. So that, what are they doing there? They're trying to market to you.
Okay.
Because you take your car in for a service or something, or to fix something, and they give you something to drive. Their customer service is impeccable, right? Because they're selling that next vehicle.
Okay.
All right? So they're not just using they're not just trying to reduce their exposure through moving their production, but they also are ramping up the other side of business. So let me stop talking marketing and management and focus on international financial management. All right, so Toyota would have shifted their production and they would also have shifted their sourcing, all right, to the
Yes.
US.
Sorry about that.
They also started using what they term here attractive lease deals, all right, to try to reduce the price gap. So if you lease a vehicle, all right, leasing is done here, but not as much as in the US. So a lot of people you see driving luxury vehicles in the US, they lease. It reduces the cost to you because the lease, what you pay monthly for the lease is much cheaper than if you purchase the vehicle. But there are restrictions, of course, right? So you lease a vehicle for 3 years, 3 or 4, usually 3 years, and you take it back and you lease another one. You don't own it, but you're
I like
losing
that.
it. You have to pay the insurance and so on, but it's just as if you don't have, it's just as if you own it, because you don't have to worry about selling, trading it, right, and finding, if you trade it, you might not get exactly what you want, but
Yes.
so they use leasing to close the price gap. So that's another technique to keep their sales up so that they can continue to increase their operating cash flow. All right, so here, what they're doing here, they reduce their costs and increase their operating cash flows. All right. However, Toyota would have had a problem, and so that's something they needed to look at. So they maintained the US market share, all right, by moving production, and they also got rid of that exchange rate risk. However, they had excess capacity, all right, in Japan. And so with that excess capacity, remember, you still have a fixed cost, right? And so they were utilizing their domestic plant. They had some job losses. That is another problem on its own, all right? So that's an example of a huge multinational that initially was producing in Japan only, had moved some production to the US, and because of the strength of the yen, because the yen would have appreciated so much, they moved a portion of their production to the US. They moved their sourcing of inputs to the US, where they were sourcing from out of Kentucky. All right, and they were making their own engines. Nissan also would have increased their production in the US, but Nissan, what they did was to increase their production in Mexico. So a lot of the Nissan vehicles that we get here are made in Mexico as opposed to Japan, right? And of course, Mexico is a much cheaper market to produce in. And then, however, the problem with Mexico is that the peso would have depreciated against the dollar, and you go back to the Mexican peso crisis, all right? And so you would have that issue there. So Toyota, I would have to do the research here. I didn't do the research, but Toyota would have probably shifted some of its production back to the US with the depreciation of the peso. All right. So what you recognize is that the multinational company can opt to source from a different country. So Toyota would have had a flexible sourcing policy. All right. And so not just Toyota, but a number of other Japanese companies would have established their flexible sourcing policies. Here they note that flexible sourcing doesn't have to be confined to just material and parts, but of course it can extend to your employment as well. All right. We see it here in Antigua. I don't know if you are aware that the Epicurean group, that group actually brings people in to work. All right. So, so they have Filipinos and well, I know of Filipinos. I don't know what. All right. So they bring people in to work because they somehow. I don't know how they pay them less because we have labor laws, but perhaps the workers at Epicurean are not unionized.
Perhaps the Chinese do too.
They're unionized. So I'm not quite sure how that works, but we leave it right there. Okay? All right. It is almost. So we didn't get to touch translation exposure. It's 12:25, so there's no point in starting translation exposure at this point. What I want you to do is the mini case, Merck, exchange rate risk management at Merck. I want you to go through that case. It is on page, I have to tell you the page in the book because my page and your page PDF might not be the same. So it starts on page 96, the exchange risk mini case at Merck. Okay, so it's page 2, starts on page 296. And So you need to go through that case, and then in the case it identifies Merck's 5-step procedure for financial hedging. All right? And what I want you to do with that is you write a summary of the case. I want you to write, so you're going to prepare a summary of the case, and that's the first thing. And the second thing you're going to do for me is to highlight the issues in the case, highlight the key issues in the case, and the solution. So all of it is right there for you, but I want you to go through and pull these things out. And the last thing, I want you to give at least 2 recommendations as to what else Merck could do. I'm going to put it in the portal, but I'll read it back.
Stop being so Merck.
So, I want you to give me a summary of the case. I want you to identify the key issues in the case. I want you to detail what was Merck's solution. And please don't write it word for word. And the last thing, give at least 2 recommendations on what else Merck could do to solve its problem, to address its problem. And when I say 2 recommendations, I don't mean not what they have here. What, based on your reading and everything we've discussed, what are 2 other things Merck could do? All right?
Thank you.
So it will be for next week.
Next week, Wednesday?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Miss, I'm having a really hard time with the previous class. With the, what do you call it? Like the floating, not that. With options, future, not future, is it futures? Forwards.
Oh, okay. So
I have to go over it really.
you need to ask your tutorial
Okay.
lecturers go.
And I kind of came in late for the tutorial, so I don't know.
And she would have given you your solution.
Yes,
and
she
she would
did.
have,
I haven't looked at them yet.
given you the steps
Yes.
for the payables heads and for the receivables heads.
Yes,
I know
yes.
that.
Yeah, I saw them, but
So it's practice.
practice, okay. No. Hold on. I'm not girl that does that. So no problem.